Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular meeting of the District Council for Tuesday, December 3rd. We meet, as always, tonight on the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. Please May I have a motion to adopt the amended agenda? Moved by Councillor Herford, second by Councillor French. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Any noes to motion, Council? We do not have any delegations this evening or proclamations. Anybody here tonight that feels, so this is consideration of unscheduled public attendance. If there's anyone here tonight that feels that they cannot wait 2 weeks to get on the agenda that needs to speak this evening. Seeing no one, we do have a timed item tonight, and that first item is development permit number 525, the Buckley Avenue Affordable Housing Development.
Thank you, Mayor Elliott and Council. My name is Elaine Naseby and I'm a planner with Community Planning. Jonas Felaniskis is here as well, Director of Community Planning. This evening we are bringing forward development permit number 525 located at 38648 Buckley Avenue. This is a development permit with variances, and this is an affordable housing and youth hub project. It is a partnership between Sea to Sky Community Services Society, BC Housing, and the District of Squamish. This image shows the project's location and context. So it is located at the south end of the Dentville neighborhood. The existing skate park is located at the south end, and it will remain. The surrounding area has multifamily and duplex zoning and has seen some infill densification in recent years. There are 3 schools in proximity to this site to the south: Howe Sound Secondary School, Squamish Elementary, and École Les Aiglons. The district's existing Youth Resources Center is in an aging building directly south. So DP 525 is a 5-story, 76-unit affordable housing development, and it will house the district's relocated Youth Resources Center on the ground floor of the building. In terms of the affordable housing, the apartment unit sizes are based on BC Housing's design guidelines. And there will be 12 studio units, 48 one-bedroom units, and 16 two-bedroom units. It's a mixed income housing building, so they're all below market rent. And this image shows what some of the anticipated rents are at this time. Some of the units would have deep subsidy, some rent geared to income, and others would be CMHC market units. So the other main component of the building is the youth hub, and it is at the south end of the building. So you can see it in this image with that extended canopy. So the youth hub will offer a comprehensive range of recreational, cultural, clinical, and wellness service program supports for youth in the community. The floor plan includes a grand room with an oversized garage door that can be opened to outside. There's also seating and games. A servery is a kitchen and an eating space. There's a large multi-purpose room with tables, chairs, and a movie screen. There's space for counseling. There is a covered outdoor space with an oversized canopy, and outside there are seating areas, a basketball hoop, garden beds, and flex space for programming and events. There is also a small administrative office. In terms of active transportation, the district-wide Discovery Trail provides a local off-road route for pedestrians and cyclists. So it does run north-south through the community on the west side of Highway 99. The 3-meter-wide multi-use path is proposed to be relocated from its current alignment, which is in proximity to Britannia Slough, so to the east side of the building. So relocated to the west side of the building, closer to Wilson Slough. The reason for that is that it would be farther from a water course, and it's also a more direct alignment to connect from the north to the recently developed Discovery Trail that's located on the Howe Sound Secondary parcel on Buckley Avenue. And then in the future, the district will complete the portion of trail from the south end of this parcel to House Sound Secondary. So the parcel is located in 3 development permit areas, DP Area 1, 2, and 3. Environmental review, so DP Area 1 forms part of development permit number 525, and all of the bioinventory recommendations are required to be followed. There's also the maximum 30-meter setbacks from Britannia Slough and Wilson Slough. Development permit area 2 is separate from DP number 525, and that will maintain secondary floodway capacity as the site is designated as a conditional densification area and a secondary floodway. The development has applied for and been granted a site-specific exemption from the flood construction level due to a hardship for the youth center and related uses that are located at grade below FCL, as this is outside the downtown exemption area. So tonight we're reviewing development permit area 3 for form and character of the building. The architect has worked to reflect the colors and style elements of the adjacent Newport Landing townhomes to fit this building into its context. You can't see it very well on the screen, but the Newport Landing townhomes are that image on top left. So the building features peaked roof elements and wood soffits, stained glue lamp posts, cantilever up to the roof on the building facade. And a reference to wood is made with a fiber cement faux wood lap siding. The facade has several different cladding elements. So the base is painted concrete, which is concealed with plantings at grade. Feature areas on the first 2 stories are clad in brick in a gray color. There is hardyboard, lap siding, and shingle siding in gray and blue colors. And as a highlight, above the main entry, a smooth metal composite panel with reveals forms a highlight element. And so windows are a vinyl material in a charcoal color. And there are metal grates at the concealed parking area to provide security, light, and air into the parkade. The landscape provides a mix of deciduous and evergreen trees and shrubs. There are shade-tolerant plantings to the east of the building. There's a grove of trees planted between the existing townhouse development to the north and this building. There are trees in the parking area and at the youth center area. There are also evergreen trees planted north of the skate park to provide a visual and sound buffer. There will be project signage as you enter the development on a pillar. Basalt stones are used to retain the grade at the skate park. And there's a post and rail wood fence running along the riparian setback areas to discourage access to these sensitive environmental areas. There's a rich palette of site furnishings and community garden boxes, and as I previously mentioned, basketball hoop are located in proximity to the youth hub. So this project was brought to our advisory design panel, or ADP, on September the 12th. ADP did have a lengthy discussion and comments, and the applicant responded to all of them. The items to note, so ADP suggested that the front entry be accentuated, the front entry to the residential component. So that was revised with a raised canopy there and that vertical blue metal element. ADP commented that public art should be integrated into this project, and so the site plan in the center of here, we've got public art mural by the youth on a ramp that comes down connecting the skate park to the youth center. In terms of covered outdoor space, there had been a wraparound canopy at the youth center, and the applicant extended that canopy further to provide a greater covered outdoor space for youth. So there are 3 variances to the district's zoning bylaw as part of this development permit. The first is for parking. So the development requests a 7 parking space variance, so from a required parking count of 95 spaces to requested count of 88 spaces. The parking variance would allow for a multi-use outdoor plaza space that will connect the youth hub to the existing skate park. This will prioritize youth space in the community by ensuring that the skate park maintains its current space appeal and identity, together with a strong connection to the youth hub. The plaza will be programmed based on the direction of Sea to Sky Community Services Society with a flexible use, hard surface space. So when the parcel was rezoned to allow for this affordable housing development last year in 2018. And as part of that comprehensive development zone, so a unique zone to this site, it brought in the zoning bylaws typical visitor parking count. So that's a requirement of 0.25 spaces per residential unit. In 2018, the development site plans were in an early state of design. So that 0.25 visitor parking space requirement for the 76 units results in 19 visitor spaces. The building is centrally located in proximity to downtown services and schools on the Discovery route and bus route. So the location and connectivity increases the potential for visitors to arrive at this site by not having to drive, while some visitor parking will still be provided. Lower visitor parking requirements for rental tenure buildings located in close proximity to multimodal means of transportation is an emerging practice in other municipalities. For reference, New Westminster requires 0.1 parking space per unit for visitor parking for purpose-built rental buildings. So with the variance for the 76 units, there would be 12 visitor spaces provided. The table on this page provides a comparison from the left of parking that would be required for this multifamily building based on zoning bylaw regulations if it was built downtown. So that would be 86 stalls total. Next, in compliance with the CD 89 zone, the parking required would be 95 stalls for the project, and to the right is the proposed variance, which results in a total count of 88 stalls, which to note is 2 stalls greater than what would be required if this was built downtown today. So the second variance is for indoor amenity space. In 2018, the district amended the zoning bylaw with the requirement for an indoor amenity space. And so in this case, this project is prioritizing affordable housing units. There is ample public outdoor space on this parcel with the existing skate park, also a new neighborhood park in the northwest corner of this site, as well as the Discovery Trail that runs right through this site. There's also the youth hub space that could be used by the building's residents if it was organized with Sea to Sky Community Services. And if the indoor amenity space was included in this proposal, it would come at a loss of multiple affordable units. The final variance relates to trees in a parking area. So our zoning bylaw has a fairly prescriptive requirement for landscaping in parking areas of having 1 tree per every 8 parking stalls in a planted island. That requirement is there in order to create shade and bring in living elements into parking areas, not wanting an expanse of hard paving. In this site's instance, the existing riparian setbacks, the trees in those will be preserved, and so those will create the shade and those living elements. And then to note, there are 69 parking spaces located outside on this proposal, which would result in 9 trees being planted in the parking area in these planted islands. For this site plan, there are 10 trees in the parking area. They're just not in these planted islands every 8 stalls. They're in other planting areas in the parking area. In terms of policy, affordable housing, residential infill, workforce housing, and purpose-built rentals all meet a critical affordable housing need in Squamish. Other policy from our OCP relates to natural areas network, environmentally sensitive areas, and eco-assets. As this is a currently undeveloped parcel, so our OCP calls on preserving natural areas and maintaining and supporting the ecosystem services and ecological assets that those natural spaces provide. Through site development, there would be a loss of vegetation and habitat. However, maximum sensitive area buffers are established on the Britannia Slough and the Wilson Slough with those 30-meter setbacks of preserved riparian vegetation. Also related to policy is the perpetually affordable housing policy, which is in process. The proposal aligns with the with the council priority areas by maximizing use of existing infrastructure, placing density close to downtown, encouraging behavioral shift by encouraging access to the building by active transportation means. There are 76 mixed income affordable housing units. The building would provide local employees with secure, affordable rental housing. And finally, there is ample public space with existing skate park, a new neighborhood park, and the Discovery Trail. For engagement, there was a public information meeting that was held for this development permit application on October the 2nd. There was roughly 15 people in attendance. Most attendees were neighbors from the adjacent Newport Landing townhomes. There were also Dentville residents and some skate park visitors. So the concerns that were voiced at that meeting and in the 10 feedback forms that we received included concerns related to traffic on Buckley Avenue, and also suggestions to widen the entry to the project's access road. Also, there was concern related to loss of green space and biodiversity. And if we have any traffic-related questions, we do have Dave Merrow, Director of Major Projects and Engineering, here to answer those. So the staff recommendation is that Council does authorize development permit number 525, subject to resolution of site lighting and signage to the satisfaction of the District of Squamish Director of Community Planning, registration of a flood hazard covenant on title, and also the adoption of an associated housing agreement bylaw. And then the 3 variances that were covered in this presentation. So the variances to indoor amenity space from the amount of 2 square meters per dwelling unit to that none shall be provided. Variance to off-street parking from 0.25 spaces per unit required for visitor parking to 0.15 space per unit required for visitor parking. And the last variance was the landscaping from a minimum of 1 tree per 8 parking spaces to 1 tree per 15 parking spaces. And staff provides an alternate recommendation tonight if council chooses, which is to approve development permit number 525 with no parking variance using the original application submission's parking layout for the area between the youth hub and the skate park. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McPhee. The public will have an opportunity to speak, but I'll first go to council with any questions. Councillor Anderson.
Yes, I wonder if I may ask about the trail relocation, the Discovery Trail relocation. The maps that we're showing here don't quite show the easterly portion of that trail. My question is, where will it cross? Will it be using the present crossing by the youth center? Will that be the new designated route of the Discovery Trail? If you could just address that.
Through Mayor Elliott, That portion has not yet been, that alignment has not yet been determined.
I see.
Yeah.
Will the matter of the trail, I understand it's under some ongoing review, will that come back to council in a report, or?
Sorry, what do you say, the trail?
I Premier, believe it would come back to council for our capital projects for active transportation. So
Very good.
You done?
Thank you. Had a couple more questions.
Keep going, please.
Okay, there is a good deal of discussion about drainage in the report, that is potential impacts on the riparian area. And I wonder if you could just in brief, what is in a nutshell the strategy for drainage to avoid draining into the riparian area? The discussion in the report is focused on, for example, the permeable or non-permeable surface, for example.
Through you, Mayor, I will let our engineer address drainage.
Good evening. Dave Merrow, Director of Major Projects. The applicant is currently developing a stormwater management plan for the site. The preliminary work that we've seen is trying to, as best as possible, maximize infiltration. However, recognizing the tidal influence of the site and the high groundwater table, that might be limited. We have also assessed the capacity of and are planning to use the existing stormwater outfall that was constructed as part of the Newport Landing townhome development. So surface water collected from the site on impermeable areas will be transmitted to that outfall.
Thank you. I wonder if while we have Mr. Morrow here, if I may ask about the traffic matter that's been raised by a couple of the area residents. Wasn't otherwise addressed in the report. Was there, for example, a traffic study done for the Newport Landing project? And could you address that issue of, I suppose it's northbound right turning off of Buckley into development? I think that's what the residents are concerned about.
Through the mayor. My understanding is that the size of the Newport Landing development did not necessitate a traffic impact assessment. A limited traffic impact assessment was completed for the Buckley Avenue project. The same consultant was retained through a competitive process that also did the GMAR traffic impact assessment. So they utilized a lot of the data that was collected as part of that study. It was determined that with the development and future growth in the area, the traffic movements at all the intersections, including Buckley and Cleveland and Wilson Crescent, as well as Britannia, all operated acceptably with the addition of the limited traffic during peak hours from the Buckley Avenue Affordable Housing Project. It was, however, there was one recommendation for improved turning lane infrastructure at Cleveland and Buckley, and that will be completed as part of the GMAR project.
Thank you.
I have Councillor Herford and then Councillor Pettition.
Actually, my question was around the traffic. So,
Councillor Pettition?
So, as I understand, BC Housing is funding a lot of this project, but they've asked, or the proponent has asked for variance on the amenity space, and then there's some guidelines that haven't been met, and there was a suggestion that if, in particular, we didn't accept the variance on the amenity space, we would lose units. And I'd just like to understand sort of BC Housing's commitment and, you know, why we couldn't say, well, no, it's the 76 units and we want the funding, and that amenity space is a requirement of our current zoning. Like, what is there room to sort of, at this point, to say, no, we don't care about the guidelines, this is what you're getting, and like it or not?
I'll try and answer that through the chair. BC Housing's funding the entirety of the project. That would require a substantive redesign of the entire project. And they've indicated that they're not interested in doing that at this point in time.
So did we then design it with the assumption we would grant this variance? Or did someone design it with that assumption? Or
If I may add to clarifying the question, when the building design started, I think it was around the same time that we were considering in 2018 the changes to the zoning bylaw, which included the amenity space. So I think this happened concurrently, and so the building initially didn't require that when it went into design. Unfortunately, the bylaw and the rezoning happened at the same time, so this was sort of a new requirement. And normally developments would then fall under those requirements, but in this case, we're trying to prioritize affordable units.
Another topic. So I was looking at the council priority areas. We have employee housing sort of identified as one of the places where this is consistent, and to me it doesn't seem inconsistent, but my understanding is that this is not really about employee housing, and I guess in my mind I'm sort of, it doesn't work against employee housing, but it's not clear to me that that's actually the purpose of this project, really. Is that?
Through you, Mayor, I might defer to Mr. Buxton with the perpetually affordable policy in terms of securing housing for local employees.
I'll through the chair. Sea to Sky will have an eligibility criteria, and I'm hazarding a guess that if you're not working locally, you're probably not going to meet that criteria. So by default, they're going to be local employees or people that perhaps aren't working, that they're in need of housing. So I think it's going to, by default, it's going by the eligibility criteria that the society has, that will be met.
Can I move on, Councillor Bingham?
Yeah.
Councillor Stoner?
Just seeking clarification on the variance with regards to the tree numbers. You had a slide up there and mentioned something about so the same number of trees planted in the parking area. So the variant, can you just explain that again?
Yeah, it would be easier if I could draw it, but so it's very prescriptive. It requires one tree in a parking, like a planted island, every 8 stalls. And in this case, the site design worked better to have a row of 15 stalls, but then like at the front of those parking areas are where the trees are. So if you were to draw a circle around the whole outside parking area, there are 10 trees in very close proximity to the parking stalls. They're just not at every 8
So it's
stalls.
the same total number of trees, they're just dispersed in one.
Yeah.
And then a follow-up on that, I noticed in the GPA guidelines, so this is under section 36.13 on the landscaping, that the project does not meet the guidelines of requiring high efficiency irrigation, as it's not a part of the project budget. But there is a fair amount of landscaping, which I very much appreciate, but I'm curious about how we address that if there is no plan around irrigation, particularly if there's a community garden. We understand best practice with community gardens these days is to actually have a water source close by. So curious just if there's been conversations around that.
Through you, Mayor, yes. So in the past, we haven't had requirements around high efficiency irrigation systems, just that irrigation is put in. And I know we have staff in operations involved in water who are currently, I think, bringing forward a draft, like new water requirements that would maybe require these high efficiency irrigation systems. At this time, it's a guideline in our development permit area guidelines. And so, yeah, I guess that there is a higher cost for it. And so on this particular project, it's not being installed, but that is more typical. As in the past, we haven't had these high efficiency irrigation, and now currently we are looking at bringing in requirements for high efficiency irrigation systems.
So there will be irrigation on site, it just won't be high efficiency?
Definitely, yeah.
And then one other.
Yeah, can I just follow up on your question? Is there a tap at the community garden?
Is there a tap at the community garden?
Yeah, Mayor through the council, yes, there's
Yep, they come to the-
there's 8 hose bibs around the building.
You have to come up to these, right?
Mary Elliott and Council, I'm Justin Dick with CHP Architects. There's about 8 hose bibs around the building. There's hose bibs at the community garden areas for hand watering. And because as you look at the plan, it's such a thin level of landscaping around the perimeter of this building, and we're surrounded by a forest, to get irrigation under parking lots and such, to do such a narrow strip of landscape wasn't very feasible. So the plantings have been designed to the surrounding, vegetation and such. So that was the intent, but there is watering.
Thank you. And then another question that I just had, not related to the variances, apologies, but I know that all the accessible units are strictly 1 bedroom and there's no diversity in terms of the types of accessible units that are being offered. So there's no studio accessible and no 2 bedrooms. So I'm just curious why that might be, or if we'd consider changing that. Or the applicant would consider changing that.
Through you, Mayor, I'm not sure if somebody else would be able to answer that question.
Mayor Elliott and Council, I think we're meeting BC Housing's guidelines for accessible suites and the direct needs of the society. When you do accessible suites that aren't required, if you do more than what the needs are, they're actually difficult to rent out. They're actually inconvenient. You have lower counters, you have a loss of storage space and such. So we've worked with the Sea to Sky services to identify the most valuable use of which suites would be accessible, and that's what we came to.
One of the things, just a minor detail, is that in some of the drawings provided for the accessible parking spots, the emblem that's in our drawings is not the emblem we've adopted. We've adopted the more active symbol, so I just want to make sure that that didn't get missed.
Okay.
I noticed that the canopy at the front door changed because of ADP feedback, but that sloping up entrance reminds me of our first-gen bus stops, which just allow a lot of rain to get in. So we just need to be really careful with how steeply that angles up and the prevailing weather. Because in those first-gen bus stops, you can sit there and you get wet. It's
Okay.
pretty. So, just a little comment to the architects there. And then, oh yeah, my other question, the trees that are planted, you said there are coniferous trees between the skate park and the sort of outside amenity space for the youth hub. How big are those going to get?
Through you, Mayor, I don't have the exact species. I don't have the plans printed out, and I don't know that Justin would know that off the top of.
Yeah, that's right. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, okay.
I believe there are 6 evergreen trees, and we can confirm that they will be a good size.
I just wondered, because you said you were using them for sound dampening, and do you need a small tree for that or a big tree? And
Big.
it is bigger the better.
Yeah.
Okay. And I was just wondering, you've asked for a variance around the parking, and I wonder if you put that variance in front of youth, what the youth would say, and if anyone has talked to youth about, do you want the amenity space or do you want more parking?
Through your mayor, I know that when the mic is opened up for the public to speak, that Sea to Sky Community Services is here, and they were going to speak to the benefits of that plaza for youth.
Okay, great. Any more questions? Yeah, Councillor Pengo?
So again, on the council priority areas, it refers to climate change, and it mentions the reduction in parking and the density downtown. But I think we've also had some discussion that BC Housing is willing to go to step code 3. I think there's an open question around the heating of the building and so on. Do we know yet? Are there any commitments or decisions on how the building will be heated?
Yes, through the chair. The hot water and the heat recovery ventilation are gas fired.
Okay. I guess I have some feedback.
Well, remember we're talking about a DP, which is form and character, and also variances. So there's only so far that I'm going to let your questions go if they're not related to form and character and the variances at hand.
Yeah, I guess it's really, and maybe there's a different time to bring this up, but just an understanding, like the council priority areas, I really appreciate that, but I guess I'm sort of looking for some summaries, just high level, that tell me whether or not this project is really driving those particular areas. And there's a couple in here, like the affordable housing, for me, this is clearly driving that, and that makes a lot of sense. But on the economy, local jobs, one of the climate emergency piece, I'm not sure those are kind of drivers in this project. I don't necessarily work against it.
Okay.
No.
So more of a general comment on our staff reports than
Yeah.
this project. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so I'll open up to the public. Because there are variances with this development permit, the public has an opportunity to be heard or present written submissions to council on the variances around the indoor amenity space, the off-street parking requirements, and the landscaping variation from the trees and islands to trees at the end of each row. So if you would like to speak, just raise your hand and I'll ask you to come to the microphone. Just clearly state your name and address and who you represent. And each person will have a maximum of 5 minutes to speak. So is there anyone here tonight that would wish to speak to this? Please come forward to the podium. And just your name, address, who you represent.
Thanks, Mary Elliott. I'm Jay Russell, Executive Director with Sea to Sky Community Services. My address is 38024 4th Avenue in Squamish. I'm pleased to speak this evening on behalf of Squamish Youth, Sea to Sky Community Services, in support of the proposed variance to add outdoor youth recreational and cultural space adjacent to the Buckley Avenue housing project. As many of you know, the design and development phase of the Buckley Affordable Housing Project, including the Youth Hub, coincided with the district's youth strategy consultation process, which included gathering input from youth through surveys and in-person forums over the course of this summer. This provided a great opportunity for our team, Sea to Sky Community Services, to solicit feedback from youth and local service providers around the Youth Hub space, both on the internal and exterior designs. So from an external standpoint around the space, we heard from youth, 67% of youth said they wanted to participate in drop-in sports like soccer or basketball, outdoor yoga, and even boot camps. 58% encouraged more indoor-outdoor skate park activities, either biking or scooters, with connectivity to that adjacent skate park. 61 expressed interest in a cozy, quiet outdoor space that they could relax and participate with their friends. And 56% of youth wanted areas where youth can have an unstructured, creative, social playtime that encourage less screen time. So that's what youth were telling us. But certainly from a health perspective, according to Canadian health measures, only 7% of Canadian children and youth meet recommended daily physical activity requirements, and that's 60 minutes per day. Our research from the same survey showed that physical activity increases when children and youth are outdoors, and each additional hour or half hour spent increases that physical activity. So we know that time spent outdoors and in nature encourages our children and youth to be more physically active. This means they have better motor skills, strengthen immune systems, they're less likely to have weight issues, health problems like chronic illness, or heart disease. Nature is fantastic for the brain. It's also a great cognitive boost. Studies show that more children and youth who spend time outdoors feel happier, less stressed, more self-confident, and more mentally restored. And finally, spending time in nature helps to cultivate fundamental skills, including problem solving, creativity, resilience, and risk identification. Not surprisingly, it can also improve social abilities. So thank you for the opportunity to show our support for the variance we believe would be a great addition to this space and, of course, youth in our community. Thanks.
Is there anyone else in the public that would like to speak to this development permit variances this evening? Seeing none, I'll come back to council. Any final questions for staff? Councillor Herford.
Thank you. The parking equations have all been talking about the units and not about the youth center and whether that's employees at youth center or the youth accessing the center. And I'm generally supportive of the concept of requiring less parking at these places that are accessible, and I like that there's outside space in the basketball court instead of just unused parking spots. I'm just a little bit worried we're gone too far. I just wonder how you how you took those other uses into consideration outside of the formula between the housing units.
Through you, Mayor, CD 89, which was adopted last year, has a requirement for 4 spaces that are for the youth hub. So those remain.
That's outside of the visitor parking capacity, which is to do with the building.
Exactly. Yeah.
Good. Councillor Bylaw.
So I think I read in the report that the step code 3 only applies to the residential units, and the commercial units, which are actually the Sea to Sky, the community services and youth hub units, from my understanding, don't. So what sort of standards are in place for those commercial units?
If I may, through the mayor. So I believe at the moment for commercial units, we're at step 1, moving to step 2. And it is related to the difficulty of controlling the air changes in these spaces that have frequent visitors in and out. So whatever the bylaw is, it's either at step 1 and soon go into step 2 or step 2. I'd have to go back and look at the building bylaw.
And are we, is there any opportunity to trade a few extra spaces, parking spaces, for a bit more youth space and maybe, fossil heating, or, are we sort of past the point of no return on all that kind of thing?
I'll try and answer that through the chair. It would be very difficult given where we're at this point in the process. The building permit drawings are basically ready to submit. It would be a substantive redesign. I say BC Housing have said they've said they're not interested in a redesign at this point in time.
I know the youth hub has 2 entrances, a main and a side one for the medical clinic. Where is that in relation to the front entrance of this building?
I'll see if I can bring up a elevation. Through you, Mayor Elliott, so the primary entrance to the youth hub is on the south facade of the building. The residential entry is under this extended canopy, and then there is an additional door to the clinical elements of the youth hub, and the idea is to provide a bit of anonymity if that's needed, rather than entering through the main door to the youth hub. And so that is, it's looking at the building, it's just to the right of the main residential entry.
So it's not that stairwell right there for the white.
Through you, Mayor, no, that's access to the residential units above.
So it's closer to the extended canopy.
So it's So this is the main residential entry. This is the secondary entry to the youth hub. And this is to the units above.
And are there any plantings or pots around there that help?
Through you, Mayor. There are planting beds that are located in the front of the building. So,
But it's not like a different colored door, or there's some element that looked like it was the same colored door as the other one. But is that, have we purposely wanted to just blend in with the rest of the building? Is that kind of the idea?
through you, Mayor, are you asking me, should the second youth center door stand out more?
Yep. Or is it purposely disguised and just part of the building?
Yes, Mary Elliott. So to the right of the main entry door, that's the entry to the clinic, actually. So that's the one that wants to be a little bit kind of muted to the main entry of the building. The one further right to that, when you're looking at the elevation, that's an exit-only stair from all the suites above. So no one ever goes in, and it's just emergency exit out. And then the youth hub access is actually just around the corner off the plaza there. There's a double door.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Our intention, though, is to make it as unnoticeable as possible. Is that right?
The clinic entry, yes.
Clinic entry.
Yeah, but the youth hub entry around the corner, we are emphasizing with the canopies and the
Absolutely.
and the
I'm
timbers.
asking specifically about that clinic entry door. It is intentionally just going to look like the rest of the building.
Yeah, correct. It'll have signage to identify that it's there, but
Okay. Okay, good.
Given some of the comments from the youth engagement strategy and the desire for this to be a youth hub, is there anything special being done between the youth hub and the first floor in terms of soundproofing and so on? Like if kids want to have a band practice or a loud mini dance or loud games or something on a rainy day?
Through you, Mayor, I will defer to the architect.
Mayor Elliott through to council. Yes, it'll meet the building code SDC requirements. It's a concrete suspended slab, so there'll be great care to the sound transmission between those two spaces.
Right. Just making sure there's no one else in the public that wants to speak to the variance tonight. All right, council? Councillor Stone include the staff recommendation, which is to approve all the variances.
Yeah.
And that is seconded by Councillor French. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I'll speak to it. Thank you very much for the presentation and the ongoing work. I think that this is a really important project. We need these units in our community, and we need the youth hub as well to be redesigned. So it's exciting to see where it's coming, or where it's come to. I think that the variances make sense for the most part. I am a little bit saddened by the fact that we had to give up some indoor amenity space. I do think that that makes areas more livable, and there's a reason why we've moved in that direction with our guidelines. But I recognize that the timing of it was kind of in parallel, and so that I think is something that we'll just look forward to shifting in the future. I'm not concerned about the parking. I do agree that the outdoor activity space is more important in this particular realm, and I think that the rationale around it being close to downtown, we are working towards walkable, connected neighborhoods. That level of parking is just not necessary in this development. And happy to see that there's the overall number of trees that are being maintained, and that's fine with it being just shifted in terms of where they're being planted. I will urge the proponent to continue to think about the diversity of the accessible house or the accessible units, because there is a cost difference there as well. So you guys know your clientele better than I do, but I do think that there's an accessibility piece, that there are no accessible studio apartments in particular, which are coming in at a lower rate for both the rent geared to income and the market units. And so for folks who are potentially on disability or have limited income, that's going to be really important to them, that they have access to those lower deeply subsidized units. So it's just something for the proponent to consider, but other than that, I'm happy to support the staff recommendation and the variances.
Thank you, Councillor Stoner. I have Councillor French, then Pettingill, then Race, then Anderson.
Thank you. I too support the staff recommendation, and I hope that at this point, this project can move at the speed of business because it's long overdue. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, I know I've had some critical, I guess, questions about this project. Overall, I do really appreciate the project and the work that's gone into it. I find myself in some ways a bit torn because I feel like with affordable housing, we've got to make compromises to get it done, and therefore we're willing to make compromise. And the other part of me thinks, well, this is meant to house a more vulnerable portion of our population, and that group of often faces compromises. And so I have some part of me that wants me to say, you know what, we shouldn't be compromising. I am a little bit worried that if we, some of the climate-related things, they're not just sort of luxuries now. It's to save significantly more money down the road. And I do have concerns that if we don't find a way to take care of some of these things now, the people who are already facing affordability challenges will be stuck covering those costs, which I think will be much more significant in the future. And I just wish there was a way we could find some resolutions to those things now. But overall, that's not enough to stop me from supporting this. And so I will thank everyone for the work they've done on this, and I will support it.
Councillor Pettingill, Councillor Rees.
Thank you. And I'll be supporting this as well. And I think just looking at the building, as a layperson, not an architect, I think it's kind of an attractive building. And I'm pleased with the look. There's several architectural features that make it stand out. And so I like the form and character. The variances I don't have a problem with. Parking, I suppose if we're going to compromise parking in any building, this would be one of them, close to transit and walkability, and also trading it for basically a youth plaza, which I think is a good use for that space. I don't have a problem with the tree variance. This is a building that is surrounded by trees on both sides. There are lots of trees in this area. And the indoor amenity space it's unfortunate we have to give it up in this particular one, but if we have to give it up in any one, I don't mind doing it here because of their outdoor amenity space and because of the need to which the space will be put. And so I will be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson.
Yes, I will be supporting each of the variances. I find the presentation given quite convincing on each one of them. I also just wanted to say that I think the whole report package here, not least the report from Cascade Environmental, involves some real value added. There's a lot of interesting discussion and exchange and some interesting issues in this report. Not least the environmental aspects for protection of the riparian area, which is given a lot of focus. It is the east branch of the Squamish River. And 10, 12 years ago, a lot of investment was made at the westerly end of it by CN in a big culvert that they installed, and the benefits of that are still to come. There's more rehabilitation is needed in the stream, including in this vicinity. I believe the slough needs some active programming, and although the recommendation in the environmental report also is leave as is, protect as is, I think it actually needs some help, some maintenance and some help, and perhaps the building residents and perhaps the youth hub patrons can be involved with that future active programming. And this report can be a useful tool for perhaps youth projects. Finally, I'm glad to have seen in reading the advisory design plan report that staff have argued for the stronger blue. There were some concerns about that selection in advisory design panel members, but I think as Councillor Race has mentioned, I think that the outcome is an attractive building, and that perhaps we're living in a town where it rains about 160 odd days a year, so brighter colors I think are welcome, and I think it's very welcome in this project.
Thank you. Thank you. You good, Councillor Hurd? I'm supporting the variances on this DP. I think This building looks great. I'm so pleased it'll house the new youth hub and that we can give over parking to a plaza for that area. I think, I feel some of Councillor Pettingill's challenge that we're not seeing from BC Housing that they're willing to go far enough in line with the province's Clean BC plan to build more efficient buildings. And I look forward to the day in the not too distant future where all the buildings coming forward, we don't need to ask questions about how they're future-proofed or how they're going to be adapted to a zero carbon era, because everyone will just be building to that. It makes a lot of sense. So I think that is sad, but we also know that we have to look at our community as an ecosystem of buildings, and there's ways that we can offset the emissions from this building in the future by being smart with other things that we build. So I'm happy to support this. It's so needed in our community, and it's in the perfect spot, in my opinion. So I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Next up, council, we need to rescind third reading of the District of Squamish single-use items reduction bylaw number 2703. Staff, do you want to do a presentation on rescinding or on the new third reading? Can I vote to do this vote and then, or do you want to do a presentation now?
If you like, we have a short presentation on the whole shebang, so you can structure that how you like.
Let's do that first then, and then we'll do both of those in quick succession.
Okay, shebang coming.
It's very technical.
We worked hard on it. All right. Good evening, Mayor, Council, members of the public, and to those tuning in online. My name is Keely Kidner. I'm the Outreach Sustainability Coordinator, and I'll be talking about the single-use items reduction bylaw and some of the amendments that we've made. Just a quick reminder that I am hard of hearing, so I may ask you to repeat yourself. Very, very quickly, I will go through some of the background information from the last meeting that we were at and talk about the specific amendments that were made, next steps, and we'll get to the resolutions. As you may recall, at the November 5th regular meeting, Council resolved to adopt the bylaw without submission to the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change strategy for approval, and Council also resolved that the bylaw be given first 3 readings subject to some amendments. The amendments that Council requested, I'll just talk through them very quickly here. One of the whereas pieces of text was removed because of the decision not to submit to the Ministry, and this piece of text refers specifically to the purpose of submitting this bylaw to the Ministry. We also added some more information to the fee schedule to make it more clear when the adoption would happen, and there was also some discussion about newspapers exemption, and that was adapted so that the exemption would then expire after 90 days after the bylaw was adopted. Through further discussion, staff made further amendments, mostly related to the resolution not to submit the bylaw to the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change strategy for approval, and these were 2 other whereas clauses that referred specifically to regulation for the purposes of environmental protection that were removed. And finally, from staff discussion and review, we also removed or adjusted the exemption for newspapers, the piece that will be expiring 90 days after adoption, to make sure that the bylaw then does not apply to Canada Post deliveries or any deliveries made for provincial or federal governments. Due to our jurisdictional reach, we are not able to regulate this sort of thing. So the next steps, the amended bylaw will be brought to, theoretically we will have a 3rd reading today, and then the amended bylaw will be brought to the December 17th regular meeting for adoption, and following early next year we will launch education campaigns. Staff will begin business transition support and outreach. Enforcement and monitoring will begin as well, and staff will consider other items for future regulation, other single-use items that can be part of the bylaw in the future. So the two resolutions that staff recommend are that the previous bylaw that was given third reading on November 5th be rescinded, and that the current bylaw that has been amended be given third reading today. Alternately, council may refer the bylaw back to staff with further direction for review. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Council, any questions? The new addition about Canada Post, that is material delivered by Canada Post specifically. Councillor Race.
I'll move to rescind third reading.
Councillor Rice moved it, seconded by Councillor Stoner. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Would anyone like to move third reading? Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Herford. Any discussion? No. Let's get going. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We'll see you on the 17th. Okay, so, council, we have to appoint, well, first we have to approve the acting mayor schedule, and then we have to appoint everybody to all the different boards and committees that we sit on. When we get to appointing people, I'll just have people sort of put forward their names. If there's more than 2 people that want to vie for the same thing, we will have a vote. A motion, do we need a motion for the acting mayor schedule? Yes. So motion to approve the acting mayor schedule for 2020. Moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor Race. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. I look forward to working with all of you on that schedule. Okay. So pursuant to the Local Government Act, we have to appoint 2 people to the SLRD. Currently, that is myself and Councillor Race as directors, Councillor Stoner as first alternate, and Councillor Pettingill as second alternate. All of those people expressed a desire to continue in those roles. So unless someone puts forward their name, that's what I would propose as the motion. All right. So I'm not seeing anyone make any suggestions. So that would be Mayor Elliott, Councillor Race as directors, CSRD, Councillor Stoner as first alternate, and Councillor Pettingill as second alternate. Yeah. Moved by Councillor Race, seconded by Councillor Stoner. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Municipal Insurance Association of BC. Currently, Councillor Race is the designated appointee. And I think I'm the alternate. Yes. Councillor Race, you're still willing to stand?
But I'm open to others.
Unless someone else would like to do this? How's it back?
I wouldn't mind, actually, I'd be interested.
Councillor Race will step down so that your name can be put forward. So that Councillor Pettingill be appointed as a voting delegate to represent the District of Squamish with the Municipal Insurance Association of British Columbia, with the mayor appointed as an alternate. Moved by Councillor Race, seconded by Councillor Stoner. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Library Board. Library does express an interest in continuity, and Councillor Herford, I believe you want to continue in this role?
Yes.
Another year?
Yep.
Is there anyone else interested in this position? Seeing none, I move that Councillor Herford be appointed to the Library Board for a 1-year term, seconded by Councillor Race. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. There is some movement around the Smokeless Park Select Committee. The current appointee is Councillor Anderson. I've spoken with Councillor Stoner, who's expressed an interest to take on this committee. I've spoken to Councillor Anderson, who wishes a position on the Community Forest Board. And there could be a little I hate to use the word quid pro quo.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
But, so, I guess Councillor Anderson, would you still like to stand for Smokeless Park Committee?
I will decline. There's a couple of outstanding items, small items of business that I was going to perform for the committee. These I can pass on over to any newcomer, so no challenge in offering that position.
Okay. So I move that Councillor Stoner be appointed to the Smokeless Park Committee for a one-year term, seconded by Councillor French. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Public Arts Select Committee, Councillor French has expressed a desire to continue in that role. Is there anyone else that is interested? Moved by Councillor Race, seconded by Councillor Herford. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Community Forest Board. Currently, the appointees are myself, Councillor Herford, and Councillor Stoner. Councillor Anderson has expressed a desire to step onto this board.
I will step away.
See how agreeable we all are? Makes my job so much easier. So move that, is there anyone else that wants to serve on this board? We haven't met yet. It's really easy.
All the hard work is still coming.
Yeah. So move that Councillor Anderson, Councillor Herford, and Mayor Elliott be appointed to the Community Forest Board. Moved by Councillor Race, second by Councillor Stoner. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. And that the August 4th and August 18th regular business meetings be cancelled, and that the district approve the 2020 council meeting schedule. Moved by Councillor Race, second by Councillor French. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. So get a break. Next up, under Community Services, we have the Indigenous Cultural Safety Training Grant. Is there a staff presentation on this?
We are looking for that staff individual. Council
Can we find them?
Oh, yeah.
They're coming.
We're just quite quick on the last item.
Very efficient. Hello. We're just moving right along here this evening, so welcome. Chief Stoner, Ms. Louder. Thank you. You have the floor.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having us. The UBCM administered Community Emergency Preparedness Fund has recently introduced a new funding stream for 2020. And this funding stream intends to support communities to provide emergency management personnel with Indigenous cultural safety and humility training. The Squamish Emergency Program would like to apply for this funding to develop and deliver a training program which focuses on experiential learning, and the training will help develop skills and promote positive partnerships between district emergency responders and Indigenous people, with a special focus on the Squamish, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Lil'wat First Nations who are living in our immediate region. The training will be targeted at emergency responders, including RCMP, fire rescue, district staff, and public safety lifeline volunteers. And it will help ensure personnel are able to effectively partner with and provide assistance to the Indigenous communities living in our Sea to Sky corridor during emergencies. We'll be using practical emergency management recommendations from recent reports, including after-action reports from the 2017-2018 wildfire and flooding seasons, and these will be incorporated into the training program. This will help improve individual and collective abilities of emergency personnel to work effectively with Indigenous peoples living in the Sea to Sky region. So that being said, the Squamish Emergency Program would like to ask Council to approve the following resolution: that the District of Squamish submits an application in the amount of $25,000 to the Union of BC Municipalities for an Indigenous Cultural Safety and Cultural Humility Training Grant under the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any questions?
I'll move the recommendation.
Councillor Herford moves staff recommendation, second by Councillor Stoner. Any comments? Councillor Stoner.
Just thank you for continuing to seek out these opportunities. I think this sort of training for our emergency preparedness staff is so critical. So thanks for doing the work in terms of the grant application. I hope we're successful.
Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And then on to volunteer firefighter compensation policy.
I'm here today. I got this.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Here today to ask our council to support the following resolution, that the District of Squamish adopt a revised volunteer firefighter compensation policy that will direct firefighter remuneration to individual members. And this initiative comes out of our 5-year plan. One of the goals of that 5-year plan was to reduce our current volunteer firefighter turnover, which is in the area of 20%. We want to get it down to 10%. It's a very ambitious goal, but we feel we can get there. Our Planning and Growth Committee, which is made up of career firefighters, volunteer firefighters, and fire chiefs, they're given this task. And the first thing they wanted to do was really find out what the challenges were that our volunteer firefighters were facing. So they had a workshop with just volunteer firefighters. And a lot of great feedback came out of that, but the biggest issue that was focused or that came up was the volunteer firefighter remuneration system. And so the Planning and Growth Committee got together a group of volunteers, only volunteers, and asked them to look at this and what they wanted to do with this, and what they basically wanted to do was have a referendum on the remuneration system. They wanted to look at 2 choices. The current status quo, which is basically this. Our firefighters go out, they earn remuneration for attending training, for attending or going to events. That remuneration is pooled together in a fire hall and distributed amongst the members for various initiatives. So they wanted to look at that versus a paid on-call system for where the remuneration earned by the volunteer firefighter goes to the volunteer firefighter. The referendum had a great participation. 77% of our members participated in the poll, and of that, 73% were in favor of the change. As far as the impacts on the district, I looked at this earlier and I thought that there would be no financial impact. Our finance looked at this, they looked at it and said, although our firefighters will not actually be technically volunteers, they're still best practice is to take taxes of the monies earned, and with that comes a certain amount of CPP that we have to contribute. So the impact will be about $4,000 to the District of Squamish for this change, if we choose to go that way. As far as organizational impact, there's certainly a lot of work that goes into making this change happen. At the front, there's system changes that we have to put in place. After that, the impact is much less. It's just the impact of additional essential payroll that's working its way through the system. One other issue that I did want to address, what we are looking at is a change in the payroll system. We're not looking at the change of the quantity of remuneration. That did come up in the work groups and those type of things, and firefighters did issue that. We are hoping to come back in the 2021 budget, so not this current budget cycle, but the next budget cycle, and put a case forward for that. That will be based on industry best practice and more work with the volunteer firefighters before we bring that forward. And so that's the Coles notes of the report, and happy to hear questions.
Thank you, Chief Spooner. Any questions, Council? Councillor Anderson.
I'm wondering if you've looked at other fire departments and other communities just to do some benchmarking as to their practice on this matter.
I have, and it's, as with all fire departments in BC are a great deal, but if you look at our comparables, all are comparables. Any fire department that's roughly our size is paid on call, or bigger. Yeah.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Councillor Reese? Councillor Reese's recommendation, seconded by Councillor Hertford. You want to speak to it, Councillor? No. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks for bringing that forward.
Thank you.
Up next is our consent agenda. Council, there are some blue pages on your, in front of you. The word is desk I was looking for. One is that we clarified in the minutes around the community enhancement grants that these votes were in principle and they were not final commitments. And also we got a letter here that was added from Mayor of Saanich about modernizing the Motor Vehicle Act so that we had the ability to reduce road speeds without putting a sign at every corner of every intersection. So those are in the consent agenda now. So someone want to move the consent agenda?
I'd like to
Pull something?
offer a correction on the November 26th committee whole minutes.
So you need to pull those minutes?
Yes, please.
Yep,
Yes.
and we'll deal with those later. Is there anything else you need to do?
Yes, the letter, item number 4 from Mr. Blackman regarding motor car share.
Okay, pull letter 4.
And
Anything else?
letter 2.
2. All right, so we'll deal with the letters under correspondence, and we'll deal with the minutes under number 13. So motion to move the consent agenda. Moved by Councillor Stoner, second by Councillor Anderson. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Correspondence, let's deal with the pulled letters first. Letter 2, Councillor Pettengill.
Yeah, I was wondering if we might forward this letter to Sea to Sky Community Services and Helping Hands just for their feedback on whether it makes sense to them for us to take action on this. Coming out of UBCM, I was surprised to learn we are higher on the list of communities impacted by the opioid crisis than I'd realized, and so it's not my area of expertise, and I would just appreciate some thoughts from them on if this makes sense for us to take further action. So I would move that we refer it to Sea to Sky Community Services and Helping Hands for their feedback.
Okay, that's moved by Councillor Pettengill, seconded by Councillor Herford. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Letter 4 from Mr. Blackman about motor car share. Councillor Anderson.
Yes, Mr. Blackman's letter addresses parking of car share vehicles. And just to quote from the letter, he had expressed or encouraged that a vehicle might be placed in a location other than downtown. There may be other parking issues with the vehicles, but we did not discuss parking when we addressed the topic of the car share vehicle. So I'm just going to suggest that it be referred to the engineering department just to make sure that they've given some consideration of the parking of these vehicles as we had not when we discussed the matter.
Can you just clarify what you mean by parking of the vehicles? We do have to park them.
Yes, it's whether there are more advantageous locations for them to be parked, whether we should give some consideration. For example, out in front of Municipal Hall is a congested area, and maybe there is a better alternative for even the clients of the car share program than out right over here in front of Municipal Hall. It's just that generally to consider the parking of these vehicles, give it some appropriate consideration.
So I do have some hesitation, Councillor Anderson, because we did discuss that Moto tries to always ensure there's a pod of 3 cars. That gives people confidence in the neighborhood that a car will generally always be available to them. And we also required 2 to be in close proximity to Municipal Hall because we are a primary user of the car. So given that, do you still feel like you want to refer it to engineering?
Well, perhaps my and Mr. Blackman's concern can be monitored in future as hopefully the program will expand, and we do give some attention to parking strategy for these vehicles. I'll be happy with that.
Okay, thank you. On to action requested, that the letter from Ms. Bufat regarding Garibaldi at Squamish. Yes, Councillor Ray.
Just going back to that letter, do we want to refer it to staff
I guess we have to move to receive.
or receive? I was going to refer it to staff just so they could monitor it. So
Okay,
I'll move to refer that letter to staff.
second by Councillor Anderson.
Yes.
All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. The letter from Ms. Bufat, that it be referred to staff for follow-up, moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Anderson. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. We had a letter about the bike lane on Judd, that this correspondence be referred to engineering for response. Moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor, someone raise their hand, Stoner. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And that the letter from our Blackwell be referred to the Director of Recreation Services for response and consideration during Brennan Park Recreation Center renovations. Moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Herford. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And the letter from S. Golden about the Victoria call to action, be directed to staff on next steps if required.
I'll move that.
The council will review the Victoria call to action, building resiliency, thriving, inclusive communities, and if required, direct staff on next steps. So the motion is basically for us to read it and then advise staff on any next steps.
I can speak a little bit further if it gets seconded.
My recommendation is that you make this motion a little bit more concrete, or else it'll get lost. So either refer it to committee of whole for discussion, or refer it to the mayor for agenda planning, or something like that, Councillor Pettengill. Because just to tell us to do more reading, which we've already done, we're not going to have a discussion here tonight, I don't think, about this. But maybe we are, so I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So just for some context, at the Livable Cities Forum, the first day, all the elected officials were seconded off to our own little room. And we worked on a bunch of stuff. This Mayor Helps largely synthesized everything we had talked about into a document, talked about it throughout the weekend, and then the whole sort of group endorsed these calls to action. This is largely a direction to municipal leaders to lead on this issue. And I guess, to be honest, I think someone crafted this resolution for me, and I appreciate that. I guess my thought would be that we consider endorsing the calls to action. I'm not sure if we need a further discussion as people want to discuss that at committee of the whole before we endorse these. And I think, yeah, so I guess my resolution would be that council endorse the calls to action.
Councillor Stoner.
May I direct a question to Councillor Pettengill?
Through the chair, you may.
Through the chair, I'm curious, having read it, I fully agree with a lot of things that are in it. So I guess my question would be for what purpose? Given that we have, as a council, already declared a climate emergency, and that really does kind of direct our day-to-day work. I'm just curious to learn more about what kind of the purpose of endorsing this would be.
From my perspective, there are a few things that are called out a little bit more explicitly than our climate emergency. And it's a little bit of, for me, just having this extra piece to refer back to remember what I'm trying to do here in part. So it's almost just a bit of a nudge and a reminder. And somewhat like in my mind, when we have a group asking for a declaration on a given day, recognize this day or that day, it's sort of in that, to get us just thinking and remembering about these type of things in my mind. Because we have taken significant steps, and I expect we may take further specific ones, like with our climate leadership team and those sorts of things.
Other thoughts? I think my fear is that we have a children's charter, we have a youth strategy, we have a climate emergency and a community climate action plan coming, and we have our strategic plan that focuses on many of these things. And we have already said to ourselves that we will look at our decisions through the lens of climate as well as First Nations reconciliation. So I'm actually worried about muddying the waters. Like, how many different things do we need to look to? We've got the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, we've got our Children's Charter, the strategic plan, we have our operations plan, we have all of our master plans. Then we're going to have a climate leadership plan. And this is all great, And I think we're doing this. So, and I think it can be found in each of these documents. So I'm a little bit nervous of adding another thing that our staff would also have to refer to. And they're quite vague. So, Councillor Ashton.
Last week, Councillor Herford and I attended the climate leadership team session, day-long session, and I'm still recovering from all of the detail that we were immersed in. May I suggest that some of the phrasing here in its generality may be actually of use and interest to our climate leadership team to help us to draw ourselves out of the detail and see the forest for the trees. So an idea may be to refer to that body in case some of this language and phrasing may be useful for their report.
Just another thought I had, listening to your comments. I believe we have some thought of it coming together in January, February, just to review our strategic plan, see where we are. Maybe this is just something we bring with us and make sure we're, as we have that discussion, if we need to tweak anything, just keep this top of mind.
I would definitely endorse that as a motion. So refer this to strategic planning.
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
I'll second that. Thank you for that. That's concrete. That's a place where I can grapple with this. So thank you for coming up with that. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Can I do the November 26 minutes first? Councillor Anderson, is there an addition you wanted to make?
Yes, in the minutes of November 26th, in the report, item number 4, Squamish Estuary Master Plan, one of the bullets, it's the third bullet down. Discussions regarding overlapping priorities between the CERT, the Central Estuary Project, and the Central Estuary Management Program. I wonder whether what was implied there or intended was the Squamish Estuary Management Plan, so CEMP rather than CEMP. I'm not aware of a Central Estuary Management Plan, so it must have been the Squamish Estuary Management Plan was being referred to. And it's not an insignificant issue.
Central Estuary Management Project is the one that the Squamish River Watershed Society is working on. Restoration Project. Oh, yes, okay.
So Squamish Estuary
You're right.
Management.
It is SIM. Estuary Management. Thank you. So, motion to approve the minutes from November 26th as amended, moved by Councillor Race, seconded by Councillor Herford. All those in favor, opposed, motion carries. We have recommendations from the November 25th Committee of the Whole that the district direct staff to work with BC Transit to implement the Route 5 Squamish Park Service Extension, and we continue free transit. Thank you, Sea to Sky Gondola, from June 13th to September 7th, 2020. Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Herford. All those in favor, opposed, motion carries. Squamish Estuary Master Plan. That we support the Central Estuary Restoration Project by redirecting the remaining 2019 funds of $15,000 to resource community engagement, and that the district work with the Central Estuary Restoration Project in order to leverage the time-limited project funding while mitigating impacts and balancing shared interests. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Race. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Stoner and Councillor Anderson opposed. District of Squamish zoning bylaw, CD's 96 zone, Squamish Canyon project, number 2685, 2018. That we received the report from community planning and that staff bring forward this bylaw to a regular council meeting for consideration of first and second reading. Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Race. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. That the district adopt the Squamish Youth Strategy as presented on November 26th. Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Herford. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Youth Hub Memorandum of Understanding that we authorize myself and the corporate officer to execute a non-binding MOU between all of those community partners there as a joint venture for the operation of the youth hub to be located in our Buckley Avenue project. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Stoner. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Business arising from the minutes. Council had some questions last time we met about the letter of support for the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. We did get some more details from Mr. Buxton. So, Council, are there any other questions you have about the information we received on this?
But to be clear, because this is a private company, what we're talking about is sort of, and we've done it before on other issues, a general letter of support around the need for affordable housing.
Yes, it would have to be a general letter of support, not specific to
This project.
this project.
I would move that.
Moved by Councillor Race, seconded by Councillor French. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We have advisory design panel minutes from November 21st to receive. Moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Stoner. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We do not have any in-camera announcements. There's no unscheduled public attendance. Is there any questions? Mr. Chua?
I'm good.
Any council or staff announcements? Councillor Anderson?
Yes, I regret to be reporting on the passing of former councillor Raj Kalon. He was a councillor who served for at least 2 terms, so the District of Squamish has three terms, yes, from I think 2002 to 2011, if he practically served with Councillor Race in his other terms. So up to 2008 then. Yeah. So Councillor, or former Councillor Kalon has been suffering from cancer for some time, but his passing has just been announced today, and his condolences are coming from widespread throughout the community.
Thank you for letting us know. Councillor French?
I attended the Arts, Culture, and Heritage Workshop on Monday, November 25th with Councillor Anderson and Councillor Pettingill. It was a great workshop. I acknowledge the hard work that was put into it by the staff involved, specifically Sarah Dicker and Devin Guest, and facilitator whose name is escaping me. It was very productive, it was well attended, and I enjoyed the evening.
Great. Anybody else? I just want to thank our staff who put so much effort into the childcare open houses that were held on the 22nd and 23rd. And all the parents and caregivers and daycare providers that came out to that. There was so much conversation and good dialogue and some kind of heart-wrenching notes also left on the boards. This really is an issue that is impacting families and primarily women. If we're really honest, and that's part of the feedback that's come out quite clearly to staff throughout this. And you know, while this isn't our jurisdiction, we clearly have an important role to play in convening and making sure that the conversation happens and that solutions are found. So I'm just really glad that we received that grant to do the planning and make those kinds of things happen. Council also attended the volunteer appreciation dinner for our fire department. And just a big thank you again to all of our firefighters for the great job they do in our community. And aside from that, oh, the Santa Claus parade. Yes, we should thank our staff for our low carbon float. We had 3 e-bikes and a Prius. Maybe not the coolest car to drive, but I think we had one of the lowest GHG footprints, aside from just all of us walking. But it was really fun. There was a great turnout. I think the kids were expecting more candy. And I don't think they filled up their pockets as much as they have in the past. But it was a great evening, lots of festive comments. And I got a few heckles from the sidelines. People appreciated our e-bikes You know, like, they said nice touch, like they recognized what we were trying to say with that gesture, and got a few cheers for that, so that was great. And thank you to Councillor Herford and Councillor Pettengill, who joined me on the bikes, that was fun. Councillor Pettengill.
I had a couple things I remembered, and I can't remember if I already mentioned about the powwow, so a few of us went, and it was really cool, as usual. We had Rob Newell from Quest present to us, Committee of the Whole, I think last Tuesday. There was an open house on Wednesday, which I went and checked out and actually got to sit down with the visualizations. And it was really cool, and spent some time looking at the data. Fantastic project. I can't thank the Quest enough for doing that, and may get myself into a bit of trouble saying this, but
Don't say it, Ben.
we hear about a low, medium, and high density, and I think high density especially makes people nervous. But when I sat down and saw their sort of visualizations of what high density looks like, it was far, far away from what would come up as high density in my mind, and it's something that I think really looked like a really actually nice, vibrant, active community. So I came away from that personally a lot less fearful of high density in a lot of areas of Squamish. So I can get some feedback about that statement. The other piece, there's one more thing. Councillor Stoner and I attended Civex on Thursday, and it was a discussion around civility. Won a couple mugs. And actually, Devin Guest and Ms. Goldback also attended that with us. So some really great presentations, and a lot of it actually focused on inclusiveness and kind of the importance of how that can facilitate civility in our communities. So it was a really interesting discussion and a good reminder to, for me anyways, to make sure I'm always thinking about taking care of other people in our community.
Thank you. Motion to terminate. Moved by Councillor Herford, second by Councillor French. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Council. Thank you, Mr. Chua. Thank you, staff.